an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 572 through 574. Many problems lie ahead, a trap awaiting in the new world. Finally, time to go. Goodbye, Fishman Island, and to the new world, heading for the ultimate sea. In these episodes, our friends just have their final moments at Fishman Island. There's another, sort of weird emergency happening with the tamate box. And yet they leave, and we don't really get to see what happened with that. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian for commissioning this episode. And Florian, as usual, is here in the chat with me. Apologies for being late. Trying to set up my new computer did not work out on the first try, so I had to go get my old one and rehook it up to everything and get started there on the older one. So a little bit of a delay. But I'm here. And so here's one of the things that I'm mixed about these three episodes, mostly because it takes so long for our friends to get going, and I have just been very eager for this particular arc to end. And I really expected that we were going to be leaving on the first of these three episodes. Nevertheless, I'm glad we're getting out of there, but I am really, the whole thing with her name is Big Mama, is that right? It's odd how she's being sort of, set up as probably having a grudge against them because of this box, but we don't actually get the fallout from that. It's just sort of put out there as something to be worried about. But then our friends move on somewhat quickly. Which, I was expecting this to delay them even more from leaving, and I'm kind of relieved to find that that isn't how it went. So, all right, let's start from the three, with the first of these three episodes. Many problems lie ahead, a trap in the new world. And, this, the fact that Luffy has given away the treasure turns out to be a bit of an issue here, because there is an explosive that I think the right-hand minister is the one who's talking to them. Is he the one that's the seahorse? But he is talking about how grateful they are for saving Big Mom, says Florian. Okay, cool. About how grateful they are for saving Fishman Island, and made them some tea and is just chatting with them before they leave. And the mention of the fact that they're going to be leaving is deeply distressing to the princess, who she spends a lot of time crying in these episodes. And guys, I am going to stand by the fact that I'm a little hopeful that despite her apparently larger role as this incredibly powerful weapon, that we won't have to see her very much, or at least for a while, because it's something that I become a little bit more aware of when Owen is home, especially when he comes home to take a nap. But I notice it by myself, of course. It's just I get more conscious of it. Her voice is so piercing. It's even more piercing than Chopper's. And Chopper at least has a sort of it's high pitched, but there's also a throatiness to it that sort of brings it down a notch. But the princesses, and this is obviously for the dub, I have no idea, with the original voice actress, if it's the same thing. But I find myself recoiling when she begins speaking, especially when she's crying, because it's so shrill and piercing that I don't even hear what she's saying because I am distracted by my pain from her voice. So I'm just, we make a pinky swear that we're going to come back. And I was just like, oh God, I knew we were going to have to deal with her again based on the nature of the role she's going to apparently serve in the larger story, but still. So in this scene, it's, Robin, Nami, and Usopp who are all gathered together. Frankie is still, he has got off to deal with the ship, and there's some other stuff apparently Nami says that he's learning to do with it. And then the minister gets the list of valuables that were stolen out of the treasure chamber. And he is surprised at how many things have been taken. And he realizes that the tamate box is part of the list and gets this expression on his face. So he has decided, and I'm a little bit confused on this, you guys. He says, like, after it was stolen 10 years ago, and that was Horty that stole it 10 years ago, correct? So is the addition of this explosive to the box like a pretty new thing that he just recently did? And it's just sort of, you know, the thing that I kept thinking was, when did you find the time to even do this at this point? Like, everything is so hectic, you know? But, his concern, understandably, when he goes and talks to the king, is that our friends, the Straw Hats, saved our asses, and we just gave them, unknowingly, a booby-trapped gift that could kill them, and how are we going to make sure that they don't open it? When the Straw Hats return, they're very relieved because it seems like they haven't opened it yet, so we're going to have the chance to tell them now. But then there is the added twist of Luffy having given over all of the treasure to Big Mom and doing this to appease her, which means that very likely, and I would, of course, were I her, Big Mom is going to interpret this as a purposeful trap, that she is being disrespected, that he said you can take all of this treasure just because he knew that there was a bomb planted in there and he was fucking with her. We know that this is not how Luffy functions, but, you know, there's no reason to assume the best about him if you don't know him. So, yeah, we're starting off this, this sort of beef that I think it's just explained enough for me that it's skating past one of my least favorite tropes, which is beef that begins with a complete misunderstanding, which has been, for those who are listening to my coverage of House of the Dragon with Rashawn, a big complaint for me in that show, because I have felt like we had in the original material a couple of characters that were ambitious and grasping, and I found it very interesting to see because women characters aren't portrayed that way often. And then the show made it that, oh, they're both really good people who just misunderstood each other and got caught up by accident, pretty much. And I don't really have a lot of patience for that. So the fact that this is sort of like we're starting a beef because of this misunderstanding, at the very least, the bomb was set up in order to stop somebody opening that bomb. And it's just a sort of series of events, but the whole way that we've come to this point feels reasonable enough that I am willing to let go of it. And I love that Nami, she has this whole scene where she's like telling Luffy that she understands why he did what he did and that he was probably didn't have another choice and he was doing what he thought was right. And she seems like she's going to be really reasonable about it. And then she just beats him on the head and is like, well, but you didn't have to give all of it away, which is true. That's fair. This is the kind of thing that I always like struggled with when I was a kid. Whenever there's a show, whether that be like a TV show or Well, I'll say mostly this happened with television shows just because it was such a comedy stereotype. Like, this was one of those really tropey storylines was, oh my God, our favorite characters won the lottery. And anytime that would happen, even though I would like hope and pray as a kid that they got to keep it and just live out the fantasy that I wanted as a child of having unlimited money, of course, by the end of the episode, something has to happen so that they don't win the lottery or they lose the ticket or something stupid happens and it all goes out the window because we have to reset back to, ground zero for the start of the next episode for sitcoms. And this show, of course, does this a lot where we have all of this treasure and then something occurs in which they get completely wiped out. And the one time that doesn't happen, we end up with this dope ship. So it's not like that wasn't, we haven't always had that happen with this show. There have been times where they have been able to indulge and get some really cool shit. But oftentimes we have to keep our friends from getting too wealthy, or any sort of financial obstacle isn't really going to be a problem for them later in the show. And you kind of need that to be a problem in order for other things to work out. Florian said, Luffy also said he will make Fishman Island his territory, so he has beef with Big Mom already, I would say. That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. But the problem is, though, if he gave her the treasure, it would feel like at least the beef is like a little bit on hold. But because of what might happen with her opening the box, it's like likely that she'll take out her wrath on Fishman Island if she can't find Luffy, which is that's a bummer side effect for Fishman Island after everything that has happened. Now, when what am I calling him? The counselor, the minister, when he goes and speaks to the king, he shares his own concerns that are, exactly what I just said of just like, but she's going to be so mad though. And basically the king is like, hey, bud, don't worry. We have 70,000 new soldiers that we got out of, I keep wanting to say Flea Bottom because that's like, the dregs of society in the Song of Ice and Fire universe, but from the Fishman district. Guys, I feel like you got to know what I'm going to say to this probably, but it is just so wild to me that the happy ending for the inequality in Fishman Island is to like just shut down a whole area and make people leave their homes, and we're just going to act like there are no families living there, that it's all just bad criminal men, and make them all become soldiers, which is, I mean, is this the best? Like, it's just so true to how the real world works in terms of the only way out for a lot of people who are in bad positions and don't have options other than going into the military if they want to be able to go to college, and the fact that we're in this fantasy universe where ostensibly there could be any number of ways of dealing with this problem, and yet the author so profoundly lacked the imagination to do something more interesting when he has wild imagination regarding so many other things with the story. I find it just very revealing. I feel like it's actually truly sad because it's just like, it just always feels like, are we doing this again? Really? This is what we've come up with? And so the fact that he's like, oh, don't worry about it if she has beef with us. We have all of these like dudes that we've basically conscripted into service. Ouch. That is not a solution to me. But that is what he says to the minister and to Jinbei, because Jinbei is talking to him about how he himself has an agreement, and Jinbei says something interesting that's like, basically, I don't have a written contract, but I have a verbal agreement, and those are harder to break, which I wasn't entirely sure if, like, I feel like it's just sort of supposed to be that he promised, and a promise person to person is meant to be like much more honorable to, like, your honor depends more on keeping that kind of promise than it does on honoring a business arrangement, which I guess I don't. It's whatever the case. He is going to break off of this agreement and try and team up with Luffy again. Well, again, he's going to leave with Luffy as a Straw Hat for the first time, but he's going to be helping Luffy again because that is really how the War of the Best wound up going the direction it did. So I consider Jinbei as having worked with Luffy already. Florian says, yeah, again, Oda had the right idea, but the execution is clunky. Also true that is true to life. Yikes. Yeah, you know, it's the sort of thing that it's funny because I have just reached a point of such complete frustration with the way that our society is set up that I'm fully in on universal basic income. I just don't see the harm in it. And it's the kind of thing that's practically a curse word in front of certain people. And for me, that's the solution. You give them money. And we just don't, there's something about Americans specifically, and I think sort of like Western attitudes, that we don't want to admit that a problem can genuinely be solved by throwing money at it when it's like a societal problem based in poverty, because we see that as sort of vulgar, and also it erases the fault from the equation. And we really want to be able to blame the poor for their own poverty. So if we are proved wrong that the poor are capable of doing like some incredible things if they are given the resources to not simply be surviving and scraping by, now we've got to face all of these other prejudices that we have had about the poor this whole time. And that really upends this like hierarchy that we have in our mind about how the rich are rich because they deserve to be there. They deserve to have more. And that just really isn't something that the hierarchy we currently have is willing to tolerate. We have got to just completely go in on banging that drum about how if the rich or if the poor just stopped getting Starbucks every day, how much money could they save? And it's so funny how disconnected that is, because I remember the stop getting coffee every day thing that was always circulated when I was young, like in the early 2000s when I was just starting off going to college and I was breaking off on my own and needing to manage my own budget. That like stop buying coffee every day argument got like, it was just touted as this, it was a very condescending, patronizing thing to say. And I really took it at the time for granted that they were saying this because this was something that people genuinely did. I knew I didn't. But I was like, well, that must be something that a lot of people struggle with, or else it wouldn't be the touchstone recommendation that everybody makes. And it wasn't until I started to get older that I was like, there are very few people that go get themselves a $5 coffee every morning. That is not, especially these days, like, most of us don't have the luxury of doing that. I've stopped going to Starbucks altogether in light of everything with Palestine. But even if we had like a local coffee shop, that would be a treat, you know? But anyway, I'm totally off topic here as usual. So here I am. Okay. I'm going to back up a little bit and go to Wet Hair Caribou again. And Florian, correct me if I'm wrong, but we, like, don't really see what happens to Wet Hair Caribou once our friends leave Fishman Island, do we? Because basically, Caribou wakes up and he is, like, in this, I don't even know, he's in some alley or something. And he is really feeling himself because he thinks that he still has all of these treasures inside his body. Because, reminder, he turns into, like, mud, basically. So it like, he reaches into his own chest to find it, and it's not there. He is outraged at this and is looking around for, like, who could have possibly stolen it. I really do enjoy how much he's, like, emphasizing the fact that they stole something that I fairly stole, and finders keepers kind of thing. So eventually, when he is perusing the crowds out on the street, he comes to see these two dudes who are working for Big Mom, and they are carrying all of this treasure. And he mistakenly thinks that these guys stole it from him, when we know it was actually fairly given. And he comes up on them, and it's like a funny scene because this guy, all he ever does, there's a real sort of overlap in his attitude as there is to Zio's attitude, but just White Hair Caribou is never ever in doubt of the fact that he can beat whoever he is about to go up against. And even after having his ass handed to him repeatedly recently, he's so sure every time he does anything that, like, he's going to really make an impression and they'll be sorry. There's no fear in him at all. It's completely, like, id driven. And so yeah, he's running down the street and he sees the lion and the Eggman, and he's shouting at them like, how dare you steal this? And the two of them see him coming and are just like, what is this guy's deal? Like, oh, you know, like, he can't come at us. And he attempts this Gatling. I was surprised that he also himself has a Gatling power. I don't remember if we have seen this before, but I didn't remember it. And so Caribou tries this, and, you know, it's one of those things where the Gatling is just going and going and going for a second. All of this, like, smoke begins to billow up, and it obscures the lion. And then when it clears, you're expecting to see the lion, like, laid out, covered in bumps and bandages. But instead, he is inside a turtle shell. And so it turns out that he is a Zoan type of, what do you call it? Oh my god, devil fruit eater. Devil fruit power owner? What do you call, like, how is that usually worded? I guess it's just like he has devil fruit powers, but there's not really like a shorthand verb or noun for it, is there? That I know of. But yeah, so he has this ability, and like the Gatling, when Luffy does the Gatling, his whole thing is actually using his arms in just a very repetitive sort of manner that has the percussive quality of the Gatling. But Wet Hair Caribou is actually, like, armed with, I don't know if it's supposed to be that the mud turns into this Gatling. I think that's what it's supposed to be. Although it genuinely looks like it's metal when he's using it. The whole thing, the fact that this is something that can be done with a mud power, doesn't entirely ring true to me. I mean, there's actual fire coming out of the barrels of this gun. But nevertheless, I did think it was funny because, like, he clearly thought he ate. And he's just yelling, like, that's what you get when you, like, steal from me. And when this dude gets up, and I didn't realize it was a turtle shell for a second. I thought that it was a armadillo, because his little tail is sticking out. It just very much looked like an armadillo, but this lion stands up and just punches the living daylights out of Caribou in a really satisfying moment. This dude, it is not nothing. I think that he has used hockey to do it, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it felt like there was more to this than just a regular punch. And the way that Caribou goes down, he is really out, So this guy is, he says the people with Logia powers always end up dying young because you fools think that this power makes you completely invincible. Which was a really interesting observation. I feel like I could definitely see that happening for myself. I am unfortunately somebody who can get complacent about things because I have a tendency to, one, laziness, and two, if I get something to a place that I like it, I don't want to change anything. And so, yeah, I could definitely see getting a power and just kind of taking for granted that, like, I'll be able to fight anybody, no problem. But, yeah, this dude really, it's embarrassing. And, like, I feel that Wet Hair Caribou, when he is left on that street, that is the last that we see of him. So my concern is that he has found a way to stow away on the Sunny. And I hope I'm wrong, because I don't like this guy. He's not even like a fun villain anymore. I really kind of want to leave mostly everything from this arc behind, including this dude. I don't know if he had stowed away, if we would have seen him by now. I feel like probably he would just hang out until they reach land somewhere, and then he would sneak off on land by himself because he can use them for transport, but he knows that he is no match for Luffy at this point, and so he wouldn't want any of that smoke, so he would just try and, like, Alex Mack it onto the ship somewhere as, like, a puddle of mud. That was a band, wasn't it? Anyway, everybody who sees this fight on the street are really, really impressed and apparently weren't aware of what Big Mom was able to do. Or not her specifically, but like the caliber of her henchmen is a lot higher than they were ever expecting. So it's a very sobering moment for all of them. So that scene ends, and this is the moment when we have the whole like royal procession, I guess, bringing the Straw Hats to the Sunny, where Frankie is waiting with the weirdest hair. It looks sort of like the antlers on a beetle that are also pincers sometimes. And all of the folks who are in this town are watching them and cheering for them and just like really, really excited to see them off. And then we get the narration, and we switch over to the Marines on the surface. And I was a little bit confused. There's just some times, you guys, with the way that this show jumps from our friends to stuff going on with the higher-ups in the government, whether it be the Marines or, you know, warlord meetings or whatever, that I'm used to it now, so I understand more the way that this works, but I just feel like there has to be a better way to, like, segue into it. It just is very jarring sometimes. And I also find myself a bit lost because there will be pretty long breaks between the last time that we were with people from this particular sect of whatever organization. And so coming back to them after such a long time, I am very much like, oh, wait, what was happening with this? I forgot, you know? So anyway, what's happening here, it seems, is that after everything has happened with the Horty releasing, or, well, not releasing, but the pirates that he captured and forced to fight for him, the pirates who were captured, evidently, like, their ships were down there at Fishman Island. And so when they took off, they all just got onto their individual pirate ships and made for the surface as fast as they could. And thus, the Marines who are on the surface are taken quite by surprise when a bunch of pirate ships just surface right next to them, basically. And the pirates begin to attack the Marines and board them and everything. And the Marines are in the midst of this fight, and more ships are surfacing around them. It's quite a lot. Like, by the time this scene sort of transitions, we've got at least 10 or 12 pirate ships, and the situation has grown more and more dire. So, we then go to a particular ship, and there is a dude polishing someone's glasses. He's wiping the lenses off. And a guy comes up to him and says, "Are you trying to suck up to her?" I was so confused. I was genuinely like, I had to have missed something. What is happening here? And we pretty shortly find out that we have our old girl back that looks like the girl Zoro trained with. Tashigi is her name. I am going to really need to try and remember her name, because I feel like it's going to be one of those that slides right off my mind. I need to come up with some sort of mnemonic device. But she sees one of the cannonballs coming for the ship. She says, "I've got it." She leaps up and uses one of her swords to deflect it. And all of these men are cheering for her and heart-eyeing her and just obviously enraptured with her. And she hasn't got any time for any of them. It's, I feel, a departure from the attitude that we saw last time we were near her. Is this fair to say? Because I felt as if when we last saw her in Logtown, I think, we might have seen her briefly since then, but it was very brief. When she was on the street saying that she could fight, nobody was really like taking her seriously. And now all of a sudden she's saying that she's respected is really, really inaccurate. I don't want to say that because that's just not how this is. But I feel like I saw her as being treated a bit more of a joke before. And at this point, she definitely at least has the trust of her crew. But as I said earlier, not the respect of the crew, which she keeps pointing out, and they keep saying, like, of course we respect you. You're way too beautiful not to respect. You're way too adorable. Things like this, making it obvious that, like, they can see that she's talented at swordplay, but it's only part of what makes her an overall, like, package in their eyes of a woman that they are interested in. I want to say sexually. I feel like it's more accurate if I say romantically, even though I don't really mean it. And, you know, y'all, with the way that things happen with women in this show, it is just such whiplash. Any woman who isn't fat and portrayed as somehow like a monster because of that. The women who are thin are always just there for men to like gawk at. And I was really not remembering this kind of tone with Tashigi when we had met her earlier. So it took me really off guard, and I had a confusing moment of like, wait, is this Boa? Because they're all hard-eyeing so much when she walks past them that I was like, is this a power or something, you know? But later on, we, like, just to sort of jump ahead, there's a scene of Sanji and Brooks spying on Nami in the shower, and I feel like every episode I need to give like a grade out of 10 points for how bad the misogyny was in that episode. But anyway, so she is also like fighting without her glasses on, and so she's yelling at a mast instead of a person about how they should know how to deflect cannonballs at this point. It's like basic shit. I shouldn't have to step in on everything. You should be able to take care of this yourself. And she says the G5 is such a joke, and to think you're all Navy soldiers. You'd better not take me lightly just because I'm a woman. You're just so adorable. How could I not respect you? So Smoker is here, and he is questioning some of these pirates about what happened. And this leads to one of my favorite little moments. You guys, he's talking to these guys and is just like, tell me what the fuck happened. And they're being real cagey about explaining which pirates saved the day down there. And finally, one of them just says, all right, fine. It was the Straw Hat Pirates. And Smoker just says, I knew that already. We get the end title card. And then you just hear his voice as he says, idiot. And I don't know why, but like his voice in the dead silence after that end title card cracked me up so bad. I was laughing so hard. So anyway, yeah, he is aware that they are probably going to be surfacing around here somewhere and is going to be looking for them. So, all right. The finally time to go goodbye Fishman Island. This episode is a really, really long goodbye. Like I said, our friends have all been brought to their ship. I thought we'd start this off and we would already be on the road. Not so. So first we have to go to Charlie, who is talking with Kami, and they all want to, like, all of the mermaids who work at the cafe want to go and say goodbye to the Straw Hats, and Charlie has to be like, you can't all go because we need to keep the cafe open. Our tourism is about to go through the roof now that Horty isn't here fucking our whole vibe up. So Charlie and Kami have a conversation because like Kami is leaving and she looks over and she sees this crystal ball broken in half. The assumption here is that Charlie broke it in half. I'll be honest, you guys, I remembered Charlie's vision as like something that sort of appeared in her mind out of nowhere, like a vision. I didn't recall that she used a crystal ball, but evidently she did. And Charlie's whole attitude here is quite curious because she's basically like, I don't want to like see into the future anymore. I'm done with that shit. And who knows, like the thing that I said about Straw Hat, considering how things wound up going down, it may not even be true. So it's just kind of the end of the foretelling road for me. I don't really want to fuck with that anymore, which I can sympathize with. But Kami's interpretation is essentially, if Charlie is saying this out loud, it signifies probably that she is even more frightened than everyone else because she knows quite well that her visions are never wrong. So if this is something that she's acting like, well, maybe I'm not right about it, she must be in some deep denial. And it's interesting because, like, I had just fully thought, and this was like before I had the wannabe episode with Florian, but I had really fully thought that what we were going to find out was that in the midst of this fight with Horty, Luffy standing in the flames was him, like, in the rubble of a wreck that the Horty pirates had created, and that her vision was going to be Luffy in the midst of the thing, yes, but the context of it would be extremely different, and it would make it suddenly, oh, I was mistaken on how I thought this was going to go. And it seems that it's just not happened yet. That it's like the fight with Horty was a separate thing from what she saw. And I am genuinely surprised because I really did think that we were wrapping up this arc and that her vision would be disproven by the end of it. And that's not what we get at all. So, yeah, Charlie is just sort of, like I said, in denial here. So then we go to the princess, who is holding Luffy and apologizing for crying because they're saying goodbye and she's weeping all over him. And the king is talking with the minister about whether or not to inform Big Mom about the potential dynamite in the box. And the only people present when they're discussing this, and they're not listening to what the king is saying, it's Usopp and Chopper, the two, like, most weak-stomached of the entire crew. And they're both panicking. And due to this, because they're not even panicking about the bomb, they're panicking about the fact that Luffy, like, yelled at Big Mom at all. As far as they're concerned, yeah, he gave her the treasure, but that wasn't enough. She's still going to be mad at him, and we're going to have to deal with the fallout from that. So the two of them are just, like, sobbing, crying, like, how are we going to handle this? And the king points this out to his minister and is like, we can't tell them about the bomb. Look at how freaked out they are just by this thing with Ma. We've just got to hope that either she doesn't open it, or it's been kept down here in this very damp environment for so long that maybe the dynamite isn't even any good anymore. And remembering this, earlier I had said, is it supposed to be that like explosive was placed in the box recently because of a reaction to it being stolen? But it sounds like it's been in the box for like 10 years. So I'm a little confused how this works. Is it supposed to be more that Horty stole the box and then just took the contents out and put the box back? So they knew that it was stolen, but they still had custody of it? Or, because why would you give a shit about the empty box? I would think that Horty wouldn't leave anything in the box to bother trying to save. And I thought that there was only one tamate box, and it was what he used to make that steroid drug. I feel kind of confused about the order in which things went and what the thought process was in putting the explosives in there in the first place, based on whenever it happened. So if anybody wants to give me a little bit more. Florian says right after Horty stole it, they put the explosive in. Okay. So Horty didn't take everything from the box? So there was something still worth protecting? Because that's the part I keep getting hung up on, like, is if he stole it, one would think that he would just take everything. And then there's no point in keeping the box. Who cares about the box? I thought it was the items inside. Unless it's supposed to be that the box somehow magically independently produces more of the drug, which doesn't sound like it makes sense to me, and things don't tend to work that way in this universe. So I don't feel like that's it. So I guess that Horty just didn't take everything, which doesn't sound like him. That's all I'll say. I feel like if you told me that he had not, that he had left something behind, I would be very surprised by that. That doesn't sound right to me. But I guess for the sake of this storyline, it has to have been the way that it was set up. So anyway, this is when Nami gets given the new log pose. And this is sort of a weird thing. There are 3 needles on it instead of the 1 needle. And the other minister has come to her and he says something about how, like, he was really upset when he saw that she had a log pose that only had 1 needle. And then goes on to explain basically that the way that navigation in the new world works is there are going to be places that are really dangerous, and you can tell how dangerous they are by looking at the movements of the needle. And a really experienced navigator that goes with their gut is going to be able to tell which places they need to sidestep. And if you only have the 1 needle on your log post, you've got no choice but to follow it no matter where it's leading you. Whereas if you've got 3 needles pointing in different directions, you can choose the one that seems the least erratic in its movement and trust that it's not going to be as dangerous as the other 2 locations. Of course, this results in Luffy seeing the log pose over Nami's shoulder, the wild wobbling of one particular needle, and then trying to insist that's where they go immediately because it sounds like the most fun. Which there is a big argument about, and I was sort of wanting somebody to, like, I wanted Jinbei, honestly, here for this to be like, are you serious, Luffy? Again? But unfortunately, it's just sort of Luffy getting beat down and told to shut the fuck up. He's out here just fully saying, I'm going to take your job away from you, Nami. I'm like, why do you want her here, Luffy? If you're just going to do whatever you feel like anyway, then you don't need a navigator. So take the fucking log pose yourself and let Nami go and shop or something. So let's see, I'm going forward here. There's the last speech with our conversation with the 2 princes who ensure that they're going to, like, train up their army and yada, yada, yada. And then Luffy is looking around and he's like, and now where's? And then Jinbei shows up looking just as dour as ever. Jinbei is always got this, like, intensity and complete lack of humor to him. There have been a couple moments where I feel like we've seen a glimmer of it, but it's mostly felt like he's very angry all the time. I guess we'll see what kind of vibe he brings, but I'm not particularly excited about it. But yeah, Jinbei nods to him in, like, one of those I'm with you sort of expressions. And Luffy is delighted. He leaps onto the deck of the ship and is like, all right, it's time to set sail. Let's go in to the new world. So they head off, and it's so disorienting because, like, it looks like they're just on a regular ocean for a little bit. And then eventually, they leave the bubble and they're out in, like, the underwater area with their ship coated again. But for a while, I forgot that was how that was going to go and was fully thinking that we were just on a regular sea. So this is when the princess pursues them and insists that they promise that they will come back someday. And they do, with a big pinky swear. Pinky promises are so funny to me. Like, I fully endorse them. I definitely did them a ton as a kid. But I really want to know where they came from. There's got to be somebody who knows and has done the research on this. And Robin says, all right, we've all given our word now, but like Zorro isn't there and Frankie isn't there. So I don't know if that's going to end up mattering at all, but the two of them have not gone in on this. We like the camera pans past Zorro and Frankie who are smiling at her, but they're not part of the group that's like standing and putting their pinkies in. So maybe it's supposed to suggest that we couldn't fit everybody in the frame, but they were both there. Trust us, because now we're going to cut to them. I couldn't tell. But anyway, so they take off and we get once again another montage of all of the characters' faces, and then a sort of interaction on the street with a kid and one of the fishmen who the kid is saying something about wanting to like go with the Straw Hats or be a Straw Hat, you know, and the fishman, who is an adult, says something about how you can't go up to the surface. Who knows what they'll do to you? And then sort of catches himself and is like, well, they're not all the same. Some of them are heroes like Straw Hat Luffy. And it was such a weird, like, it keeps feeling like a reverse racism. You know, like we're going to argue about how these people who have been enslaved shouldn't be so mean to humans. I really am going to need us to like leave this behind, because I am uninterested. And the more we do this, the more poorly it hits, you know? But anyway, this kid asks for Straw Hats. Jinbei says that he's going to get him some from the surface. And then we cut to Luffy, he's got that excited glint in his eye, and he's thinking about all of the people who have cheered him on in his life, getting the hat from Shanks and the mission from his brother, and the fact that the direction they're headed, Shanks is probably. So he's going to get to see him again, and he's excited about that. And so that's the ending of that episode. And then the third episode, where they're actually in the ocean, honestly, surprisingly little happens. We've got our friends in this ship coated. It's so funny, you guys, because I have recently been doing a ton of resin work, which if you're looking at me on the camera, you can see like my whole shit is just a mess behind me right now, because I have so much equipment out and like just in a complete jumble. But I keep seeing the coating on the ship, and immediately my brain is going to like, oh, it got dipped in resin. My next thought being like, how did they do that? Because like resin techniques, there's all kinds of different ways you could do stuff. And I just kept laughing at myself as I caught myself being like, that's not what this is at all. So this is when we get the Nami in the shower moment. And then we go to Luffy, who is going to try for some real giant fishing. And they have these two huge hooks that are about the size of Usopp's head. And they have them roped together, and they're going to throw them out there to catch a fish. Luffy sees this one fish that he decides to go for. It looks like kind of like a monkfish, which if you ever look those up, they are the ugliest fish. And they hook it. I felt so bad because it's not really hooked so much as Luffy punches the daylights out of it, and then they throw the hook at what seems to be an already dead fish, which I just don't like seeing Luffy beat animals. I don't care if it even is just a fish. I don't like it. But no sooner have they started to tow this fish behind them when a way bigger, way scarier looking fish that's like black with all of these gills or spiny sort of fins that almost look like bat wings comes up and chomps around it. And then an even bigger fish comes up behind that one. And it's easily 100 times the size of their ship. I would say probably more like 1,000 times the size. It's just huge. So they're towing it along, but the whole situation, oh my God, I forgot about the zoom in on Nami's tits as she zips up her like whatever it is that she's wearing. I don't know if it's supposed to be a dress or like a robe that you put on after showering. She is still wet, but I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But this is when they get gripped up by this white strom. Is that the word that they keep using? And it's basically sort of like a wormhole in the water that catches. It's what it reminded me of was like the jet stream. But they are being ordered to get away from it by Nami, who has been busy and not seeing what they're up to. So she comes out and they are way too close to it already. She says, you know, we're not going to be able, if you are still going to hold on to that fish, it's going to catch us and in the stream, cut the fish loose, and then we'll be able to make it upward because the fish is dragging them, you know. And Luffy doesn't want to let the fish go. As usual, he has very particular priorities. And yeah, so she's like yelling, let it go. And it's Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp that all yell up, but what about our dinner? And I was truly surprised that we had both Sanji and Zoro in on this, because of course Luffy I see. Usopp, he's so afraid that this doesn't make sense for me for his character. I feel like Frankie would make more sense. But anyway, her response is, if you get us all killed, we'll never eat dinner again. I was gone for 10 fucking minutes. What is the matter with you? How did that, like, my God, you know? And when she asks Luffy or Frankie to do the coup de burst, Frankie says that it is too late for that. And we see them getting drawn into this stream, and I was sort of seeing it as like, probably it was going to result in something more of a shortcut, because allegedly everybody who gets pulled into this dies because we've never heard of a survivor, which of course is something that Robin says to them in the most deadpan, unconcerned manner. And everybody is having to cling to the deck of the ship so that they don't get thrown off of it. And it's very much like they're on a sort of roller coaster. So eventually they get out of it. And I was sort of wondering, maybe you don't hear about survivors just because none of you have been to the New World. You know, like, I don't know. But Nami says, we hit something and bounced out. And this is when we see all of the whales passing by. And they have the scars on their nose that Laboon had. So, understandably, that's who they think these whales are. Like, the first one they see, they think is Laboon. And they're all, like... The first thing I think Usopp says, because obviously Brook is getting really emotional at the thought that this is Laboon. And I fully thought it was too. I was thinking Laboon had decided to stop waiting for them. And I really had no issue with that. But it turns out that a lot of these whales have scars on their faces like Laboon did. And so they're not Laboon. But why is it that they're all sporting these injuries, you know? But anyway, what they end up doing is using one of the whales to, like, pull them up towards the surface, because that is where the whales are also headed. And Brook, for his part, is like, you know what? Maybe some of these whales are like Laboon's relatives. I think he came from this part of the sea. So I'm going to, like, sing a song for them and make this journey a little bit more pleasant and, you know, in honor of my friend. And he does the Binks's Brew. This is honestly just like a really fun song that they managed to utilize in this show so well that it really is kind of nostalgic for me already, even though it hasn't been that long since I first heard it, you know? And the whales do seem to actually be enjoying it. There are kind of little smiles on some of their faces, and their eyes are looking over at them like they're appreciating it. And I want to mention, too, that, like, the crazy eel thing that they had caught is still attached to the ship also. So I don't know what is going to happen with this, but it is so creepy looking, and it has one of those like underbite jaws that fish have with the real curved needle-like teeth. It's extremely creepy. But they are heading to the surface, and as we do this, everybody has their flashbacks on what they were doing for the 2 years that they were away and what they wound up learning and the people that they met, yada, yada. And then they breach the surface. They go like flying into the air, and the sky is dark and there is lightning lashing the sky. It is feeling extremely dangerous. And they go sailing up into the air, and then they like head straight down, and they bounce off of all of these whales, like from one to the other. And the like vibe is supposed to be that they saved them from just crashing into the ocean, that hitting the whale was like they were each a trampoline, where I think probably hitting a whale from that height is going to be as dangerous as hitting the water. But Usopp delivers a message to all of these whales, like, when we see Laboon again, we will be sure to let him know where the rest of you are. The assumption that they're making is, like, this is Laboon's family. So the whales, like, seem genuinely pleased with this. They're not speaking, but it feels like they understand. And they are racing along on the water, and the lightning is just really intimidating. And Frankie seems like genuinely excited about this. Like, so does Nami and Robin, even though shit is crazy. All of them are just sort of like, all right, we're out here up on the fucking surface again. And then they mount a wave, and they see out and realize that this is all Navy ships. At first they think it's pirates, and they're like, oh sweet, we're about to, like, you know, get into it. But when they see the Marines, all of them sort of go, wait, what? And that is where the episode ends. So yeah, I'm interested to see what happens up here. I don't really have like an expectation more than I'll be extremely curious about Captain Smoker, because he is somebody that I didn't feel like I got enough of the first time we met him, and I have been delighted at his constant pursuit of them. And yeah, what's up with him, and what's up with Is it Yashigi? Did I get that right? I feel like Tashigi, right? T-A-S. Okay, Tosh. If it's Tashigi, I can remember it because people call me Tosh all the time. So that's going to be how I try and remember her name. Anyway, okay, guys. Thank you all again so much for listening. Appreciate you all very much. And thank you to Florian for being here and for commissioning this episode. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.